Hey, everybody, welcome to Systematic Geekology. We're the priest of the geeks, and you're like, wait a minute, none of this intro is right. Well, you're right. We're doing a fun pregame for an episode. So if you're seeing this, it's either because the episode's already out or it's about to be released, and we're going to be talking about some of our favorite comic book characters and how they relate to open and relational theology or liberation theology or both. And we're going to be bringing some interesting people in for a conversation. And by people, of course, I mean like Black Panther, Magneto, whatever. All right, that's what we're going to be doing. If you want to check out the episode, it's either up or about to be up, but we're going to do this beforehand. We had a fun topic we wanted to discuss that didn't quite fit my regular outline. I was like, you know what? We'll give some goodies for our YouTube followers. And if you like this 50 times, Will film himself frolicking through flowers.
Yeah, there's a
And
lure. There's a
look at that.
lure out
Yeah.
there for our process friends that if we get 50 likes on this, we've only gotten to like 10 or 11 on some videos, but I will, if you 50 likes, I will serve her
And
at
a
Amy
speed.
Days. I will, yeah, and
Yeah, that
that
too. Yep.
So fun.
And for those wondering, I'm Joshua Noel. That voice you heard that we're talking about, that is Will. That's the one who will be frolicking through the flowers. And we're joined by a first-time guest of this show, a friend I met at Open and Relational Convention event. I don't remember what it was called. Conference, yeah. I was like, I just knew it was Ort, and I was in the mountains, and Dr. Ord was there, and J. Patty, and I met Jill, and I'm trying to remember some of the John Paul. I met who's our other friend? I was giving the name. It's like Shauna.
Shalene.
Shalene.
Mhm.
I got the sh part right, and I was like, that other thing is not right. Okay, yeah. Met a lot of cool friends. Jill Elizabeth was one of them, and I found out she was a Marvel nerd, and I was like, well then, we're gonna be great friends. So Jill, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
For those on YouTube who are pre-gaming correctly, they haven't seen the regular episode yet. What do they need to know about you?
So at OrtCon where we met, I came up with my introduction, and it's that I'm a barbershop theologian, which I just love. My husband and I own a barbershop in North Phoenix, which we have created this like amazing micro community where people just come as their whole authentic, complete selves, and we do community with them. And sometimes we pray with them if that's needed and know what's going on in their lives. I always say I feel like they tell us more than they ever would tell their pastors.
Yeah. I
Yeah.
actually trying to orchestrate an episode with some of our hosts comparing an episode of Doctor Who where there was the barber who ended up being the story god, it turns out. And Loki season 2, there's a story god there too, and I'm making some comparisons, trying to make it happen.
Very cool.
But yeah, the Doctor Who one I bring up because he was a barber, and it was the doctor would actually go to him because it was the only place he felt comfortable, like he could be himself and not be looked at differently and stuff, and it was pretty cool. It was a good time. Yeah. Okay, so you brought up this idea of wanting to talk about like the arc, the narrative arc of comics, where we've started to kind of nuance our villains a little bit. I want to say better, but I don't want to sound like the other comics are worse. It's just we are doing better at nuance specifically, I think. Do you want to unpack some like what you were talking about and what's this whole idea? Are villains becoming more relatable, and is that a good thing?
Yes, I think our villains are becoming more relatable, and I absolutely think it's a good thing. I think we're getting recent Marvel, so I would say like MCU, sort of right before Thanos, we get a lot more villain origin stories, which helps us have sympathy, compassion, maybe even empathy for the villain and how they became the villain, which I think is pretty important in today's world. I think nuance only serves us. I think creating binaries of good, bad, right, wrong, evil, we've seen where that's gotten us, and it's not all positive. Yeah, I
Yeah.
love the language around the new villains, and, probably my favorite would be, like, Killmonger. Once he came on the scene, I was like, "Oh, he's not even a villain," like, love it. Yeah.
Yeah. So Killmonger, I know there was like a lot of things going around Instagram and stuff of like Thanos was right.
Yeah. Thanos was right or Killmonger was right to hashtag.
Yeah, Magneto too. Magneto, that question, Magneto was right kind of stuff as well.
Yeah. And Jill, did you say you had a Killmonger was right t-shirt? Am I
I do,
reading that
yeah.
right? Oh,
Mhm.
that's awesome. So you said Killmonger's your favorite. Why Killmonger specifically?
Um, well, I think w I feel like maybe we should save it for the episode in case I land on Killmonger when I'm
That's
talking
true.
about
That's true. That's a good tease. Good lord.
Yeah, yeah. But mostly it's this idea of, um, the person acting in a way that is not right as the antagonist. He doesn't have necessarily bad intentions. He sees his people, not just in America, but globally, so, like, the African diaspora, just continually oppressed and exploited and in the victim mode, and he is just trying to, by any means necessary, um, bring them freedom. He's really just like a liberation fighter. He just uses some pretty questionable tactics.
Yeah, yeah, for sure, for sure. Um, Will, you're like the comic historian. You've been collecting comics since they were cave paintings, I think. I'm not sure.
Yeah,
Um,
hieroglyphics. Hieroglyphics on cave-walls, yeah.
yeah,
Yep.
stained glass. He collects them
Yeah.
all versions of former comics. No, but so is this a thing? Is this does it just feel like a thing? Because like we grew up and as we mature, we're reading more of the nuanced stories, or is this
Mhm.
like yeah, no, like legitimately were the older comics just less nuanced with their bad guys?
Very, very, very good question. Yeah, I often tell when we go on trips and see like iconography or stained glass, I'm just like, that was the church's way of doing graphic novels back in the day. And so just how do we tell story, illustrate story, the images we use is important and matters and representation mattered then too. But I think yeah, I mean, I think you could probably trace history within the church and in politics and with institution or even how you relate to your country, this kind of uh, the binary of black and white or good and bad or those kinds of things, and then a deconstruction of that and a reconstruction of what that looks like. So even like within the church, maybe it's not just like, or let's just think Star Wars. Okay, so is stormtroopers empire and the Jedi good and the rebels good? But
Yeah.
then the course of thinking through those stories, you see that maybe the Jedi didn't make a lot of good decisions. Maybe the institutional religion around Jediism made some mistakes along the way. So there, maybe it's more nuanced than we thought of just stormtrooper versus rebels kind of thing. And I think within the church that happens, and I think in comics too, within the '80s, whether it's for the Dark Knight Returns or Mark Miller or other comic book. Medium started looking at, okay, it's not just the X-Men are right and Magneto's a bad guy. Look, he's a victim of the Holocaust, or his family was, and so maybe he has some things there he needs to speak to what it means to be oppressed and the means by which we um, facilitate liberation for people or their own people. So I think it's moved around in terms in history, and so the anti-hero, the villain becoming more um, nuanced and maybe having a point that we need to kind of think about, and not just like just the good guys versus bad guys. Is more nuanced. Life doesn't always work that way. So I think within
Mhm.
comics that's happened as well. Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah.
When you were talking, Will, I was thinking about a lot about language, and it's like what we get is not just nuance, but perspective, because
Mm,
one person's freedom fighter is another person's terrorist,
yeah.
right? And we see that in culture, in the church, and in comics, which I think is like our modern day Greek mythology.
Exactly.
Oh yeah,
Exactly.
definitely, definitely. I I don't really want to push back. It's just more of a my only hesitation with some of this is sort of like whenever C.S. Lewis talks about how people used to do that thing where they were like, "Oh, well, we're smart then now. They didn't know better back then," and how we always think like modern people are smarter. I feel like there were probably always times where we had really good stories that had nuanced bad guys. Like I feel like that was probably pretty much always a thing. It's just what stories as a culture are we prioritizing and uplifting, I think are probably used to be a little bit more plain, and now we're like actually, I think as a culture, we're valuing nuance more. But and yeah, I just hesitate a little bit because I don't want to be like, we're better now than they used to be.
Sure.
Like, I
I
don't want
think
to do that.
But I think as Jill mentioned, like in terms of bringing more people to the table of people who are telling the story. So I think Marvel and DC have been really intentional to talk people of color, people who are queer, people who have different perspective from different countries are telling the story. So it's not just one group of people type of people telling the story. I mean, most of the early comics were like um uh, white Jewish guys from New York, and that's fine from that perspective. That's
Yeah.
and that's why Captain America fought against the Nazis and different things. They had some stake in that story in terms of the Second World War. But as we've moved on, who's telling the story and the perspective they're coming from, and representation from the certain creators, a more diverse creative team on a comic book is going to create a new perspective or a different perspective from a different lens to help people understand what they're going through in their own context.
Yeah. I don't have it up right now, just 'cause I haven't put it back out since we moved to the new house, but I have DC's first ever comic where everyone who worked on the comic was someone from the LGBTQ community, and it's super cool. It's, got that, like, Alyssa Wong was the one writing, and yeah.
Hmm.
Anyway, um, I do wanna throw out too, 'cause you mentioned that, it's not just comic book, it's not just our superheroes and super bad guys. Like, as a culture, it does seem like we're prioritizing these stories a little bit more. We care a little bit more about inclusion, I think, as a culture, hopefully for the most part. Um, and for me, being the big Disney nerd and Kingdom Hearts fan and all that, like sometimes I'm like, yeah, I love a good bad guy who's just bad. You know what I mean? Like Hades is bad because like he's Hades. You know, like Scar's just Scar, man. But in a lot of times we're doing these new villains comics that Disney did, and sometimes they didn't do it for Hades. They do it for some of them where they try to make the bad guy look like, oh no, they have like a good motive and that's what happened. Or like Maleficent, they try to make like the story like a tragedy that turned her into a villain. I like a lot of this, but there is this comic complaint, including from some people from our show, shout out Christian, who are like, hey, why can't our bad guys ever just be bad anymore? Do we do we ever miss bad guys who are just bad? Like, is that a thing? Or are we glad that if they're trying to do it to pretty much all of the bad guys now?
I love that. I think we can keep Hades bad. How about if we just leave him as a bad guy, right? Yeah, yeah. But I our brains crave the binary. That is biologically how our brains have developed. So
Mhm.
yes, we want that. I'm thinking of one of my favorite books right now, which is Cherished Belonging by Father Gregory Boyle.
Mm.
And he has this through line: all humans are unshakably good, like,
Mm.
period.
Mhm. Mhm.
And so I kind of yeah, I do want all even our supernatural villains, inside there's something there. We just gotta, like, figure out why they became bad.
Yeah, I think
Yeah.
or what's the origin story? I think the fascination of why are they bad, and so we tell their origin story or see what trauma they experienced, what led them down the path that they were going down, and so then we relate to it. We have humans have a way to sympathize, empathize, and say, "Oh yeah, I feel for this person. That could be me." I mean, I was fascinated with Breaking Bad, and I'm like, I'm just like four bad choices from going down that same exact road, and so. Um, yeah, what makes I think we've talked about what makes a hero makes a villain is kinda how we respond to the trauma in our lives or a disaster or something, chaotic or tragic, and so, yeah, we're a couple bad choices away from or unhealthy choices or going down a road, and we find ourselves in that same situation, which I think even for supernatural beings, like, yeah, that could be me. I could have done that. I could have easily been in that situation.
Mhm. Which well, I mean, all it's interesting the way that we're looking at villains, who's participating in the stories, and who's participating in the creation of the stories. It's all good stuff. I I don't know. I still sometimes like a bad guy that's bad. I think again, even though it's not my favorite, the new Superman movie I think has a good model for how we can do some of this. Where Lex Luthor was just bad,
He's just bad.
but where the nuance comes in is you see all these other people around him and you see why they would follow someone that bad. And I think maybe we could do something like that. Like we can leave Hades bad, but then like now we could start seeing, oh, that's why people are starting to make deals with Hades. This is why people are falling for like sometimes we can still have bad and then bring the nuance in with other characters maybe. I don't know. I like a good bad guy, but I also like a good nuance. And I never have simple answers. It's just not what I do. I'm not that like well thought out. Anything. I always have like great. I feel like I always have good questions about good answers, and that's why I do podcasts and not books.
Love it.
Yeah. But yeah, I did want to shout out a few things for those who do love Disney villains. I'm about to go to Disney World and see some of the villain meet and greets they're going to do. They're about to open up the villain land there. If you haven't played the card game Villainous, it's wonderful. You can play as like Hades or Scar or whatever, and each person has their own objectives, and you go through the card game. Of course, my favorite personally is Prince John. My entire villain act is just I'm taxing everybody. And if I get enough money, I win. That's it. I like simple. So that's where I'm at. I love some villains, and sometimes I like them just bad, and sometimes I like them like real nuanced, like Killmonger, and you're like, maybe he's got a point. So yeah. But you guys let us know what you think about your favorite villains in the comments, and we'd love to interact with you. Will, Jill, wow, that's fun. If y'all
I know.
have anything to add as far as like the villains you love, or how we see the future of villains in comic bookery.
Oh, I don't think so. I'm, like, excited to dive into some of these villains, and yeah, I'm
Yeah,
good. Mhm.
yeah. I'm ready for the full episode. Will, I think he's good. All right. Well, guys, we hope you enjoyed this. Make sure you check out the full episode. We're going to be talking about open and relational theology as well as liberation theology and how our favorite comic book characters maybe would interact with some of these concepts, positively or negatively. We're going to have some atheist comic book characters in there, and we have no idea how they're going to interact until we talk about it. And you guys can listen to it probably now if you're watching this. We can't because we haven't recorded it yet. But until then, remember, we're all a chosen people, the geekdom of priest.